All right, so let's start. So good morning, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be spending the next 45 minutes to an hour or so um, just presenting to you guys some of our approaches to assessments. You learn a little bit about Accendo. Um, and it's great to see that there are people coming in who are interested in the kind of things that we want to share about, the kind of things that we want to talk about, things which are very close to us, things which me and my peers, my colleagues on a day-to-day basis, these are the kind of things that we face, and understanding from our clients as to how their challenges can potentially be the same challenges for everybody else, and how do we actually relate that to them. How can we get people to see that, most of the time they are not on their own. The challenges that they face are the same as other people's. They're unique in their own ways. However, how can we overcome that? So yes, so for today's webinar, again, thank you for coming. We will be focusing on challenges of assessment tools. The topic that was shared is, challenges that people don't really talk about, and how do we overcome that? And the reason why we feel that these are the kind of things that people don't really talk about is they may seem very fundamental, very rudimentary, very, very basic. And you know what? Most of the time, it is. And as most with everything, sometimes it's the small things that gets in the way. Small things plus small things plus small things adds up to become a big deal. And before you know it, you have yourself a major challenge in front of you. And as to how do you then overcome that? So hopefully the topic today is of interest to you. Hopefully it's what I share with you, it resonates with you. The chat is open. I do have my colleagues who's also monitoring the chat, so you can ask questions along the way. Please do ask questions along the way. I'll answer most of them, hopefully towards the end we have a little bit more time to answer any questions that you guys may have, or if there's anything that you want to follow up with, gain a little bit more insight, happy to have that conversation. If not, happy to have a session with you guys one-to-one anytime after today's session, right? So without further ado, let's get into it. So yes, we are going to be talking about assessment tools. Yes, we're going to be talking about why the idea of different assessment tools, the variety of assessment tools, what do you want to do it for, how do you want to use it, how does it work with the organization, how does it help you with your strategy, your KPI, so on and so forth. What are the challenges that are typically faced by yourselves, by our other clients? And it's not just a uniquely Southeast Asian, Malaysian regional problem. It's something that we are seeing globally as well. So we will be discussing about that for the first half or so of the webinar, before I share with you as to how does Accendo overcome this? What's our unique own way of overcoming this, and what makes us stand out from the rest? So this is the agenda. So a little bit of introductions, what the challenge was facing today, what is typically being done to face the challenges before we go into what we share. So just a little bit about myself before we go into it. So most people call me D. I am one of the head consultant, lead consultant for Accendo, leading the solutionizing team in Accendo, with a background in consultancy with the likes of Hay Group and Korn Ferry. Been in Accendo now close to about 4.5 years. So I've definitely grown with what Accendo has been, especially with our product. And I'll go into that with TalentPulse, growing with Accendo in that case, and just seeing how we can help our clients, how do we partner with our clients, going on this journey with them in trying to face these challenges and then taking them to the next level. So that's a little bit about myself, and I'll be your host for today. All right. So before we actually get into it, already straight to a little bit of an activity, I do want to be able to gauge from the audience here what are the kind of typical challenges that you guys face. So let me just exit the presentation here. And I believe Hardik has put up a poll. So you can see the polls on the right side of your screen. There should be chats, polls, handouts. So if you click the polls tab, and yeah, I'll just give you guys a minute or two just to quickly answer, what are the kind of challenges that you would face, and these are the kind of things that we typically see. So I'm just trying to gauge from the audience here, if any of these resonates to you guys here. Okay, so we got somebody says multiple assessment vendors. All right. Another one says multiple assessment vendors. Another one says multiple assessment vendors. Yeah, that is indeed a challenge. Okay, interpreting assessment data. Very good. Okay. So I see that multiple assessment vendors is the major one. Interpreting data. Nobody, I mean, you guys you can answer more than once, I think. Consolidating assessment data, speed of rolling out assessments, building up a positive candidate experience. These are the other areas. Okay. I think we're good with that. Let me go back to sharing the presentation. So yeah, so it definitely feels, at least from this audience here, that multiple assessment vendors is a major issue. Okay. Right, and essentially what we have as the other options in that poll is typically what we typically face when we engage with other clients as well. So just to share then with you, these are the top 7, I would say, and this is from my own experience, top 7, I would say, when it comes to assessments, selecting assessments, choosing assessments within your organization or even in your career history, looking at how you want to use the assessments. So number 1 and 2 is definitely along the lines of the multiple assessment vendor challenge, right? Firstly, assessment selection. How do you even choose the right assessment? The assessment marketplace out there is completely oversaturated. It ranges from just simple Google free assessments. You have a couple of 100 pages there already of all the kind of free assessments that you can do. And it ranges, your typical behavior type, IQ type assessments, very, very basic, right up to your, most expensive, most elaborate type of assessments, that has simulations, adaptive data analysis, and so on and so forth. And, 1,001 different assessments in between all of that as well. Right. So the idea of how do I choose the right one? How do I know which one's the right one for me? And taking a step back to that is, what are the kind of things I have to think about in order to choose the right ones, right? Measuring this right thing. How costly is it? How user-friendly is it? Is it online or is it physical? All those kind of things come into mind. Then following that, yes, number 2, vendor evaluation, right? So knowing what kind of assessments you want, are there vendors out there who are able to provide these type of assessments? Are they, even if they provide those assessments, are they the right ones? How much support do they give? Are they local? Are they international? Are they reachable? Is it always everything to be online, or can we do a face-to-face, right? And then obviously price point comes into it as well. Are they giving me the right price? Are they too expensive? So on and so forth, right? So definitely that first 2 feeds into this multiple assessment marketplace. There's too many things out there, a lot of thinking that needs to go into place, and then adding salt to that wound. You then have to think about the different types of scenarios of the assessments that you want. Are we doing it for recruitment? Are we doing it for high potentials? Are we doing it for promotions? Are we doing it for career pathing? So on and so forth, right? So it's a real pot of everything put together, mixing it, and how do you make sure that you have the right ingredients, that you're cooking the right thing, essentially. Then most of the time, when we're talking to a lot of clients, number 3, for sure, definitely quality, right? the assessment I've chosen, does it measure the right thing? How do I know it's measuring the right thing? The results I'm getting, how does that compare to any other assessment tools? B, compared to other organizations. C, organizations in my same industry, same different levels, so on and so forth. Right? So that's without a doubt one of the most important things, the quality, the assurance that the assessment that you're using is measuring what you're measuring fairly and effectively. 4, very difficult situation to find ourselves in, but customization and flexibility of the assessment. You find an assessment that you want, however, it's not quite there, maybe 70% of the way there. How can we tweak it further? How can we adjust it to fit exactly the kind of requirements that we want, right? Is it even possible to tweak? Is it even possible to change? Very difficult, something that I'll address in a little bit, but something that comes up very, very often, because at the end of the day, like I said, yes, sometimes the challenges that we all face are the same, but we also have our own unique challenges to it, whether it's unique to your industry, unique to the type of organization you're in, or unique in the situation that your company is in right now. How do we do that? Number 5, I mentioned this over and over again already. Yes, there's definitely a cost effectiveness. Essentially, if you think about it, an assessment is an investment per person, right? If I'm assessing per person, how much am I spending per person to assess them, right? And then you have to balance that. Is it worth spending 1,000 ringgit per person versus 500 ringgit per person versus 100 ringgit per person? Sometimes even up to 5,000, 6,000 ringgit per person. I have seen assessments up to that level as well. When do you decide to spend that much? Who should you invest that much on? What is the expected outcome if you were to spend 1,000 versus 500 versus 100, right? Those are the kind of things that we want to see. And obviously, yes, we all want bang for a buck. We definitely want the ROI. We don't want to, get the same results as something I could simply Google and get a free assessment online, right? Then 6 and 7, this is something that's becoming more and more prevalent. Even over the past 4 years, it's something that's increasing in terms of demand from the client side. We want to, number one, be able to integrate with existing systems. The last thing you want is to have multiple HRMS tools just doing specific little things. And, coming to assessment, you now have to buy another system potentially, right? You have to buy another HRMS, for example. And you don't want to manage 4 or 5 different systems, and even if you end up having 4 or 5 different systems, you want all of them to talk to each other. So integration is something that's coming up very, very often nowadays. Something that we are seeing pretty much with most of our clients. Every new client that's coming in, a lot of the questions they ask is, can we integrate this with our systems? Can we integrate this with our success factors, and so on and so forth? Very, very, very key, and rightfully so. And then finally, the last one, again, something that's coming up again and again. Obviously, yes, support. How much support do we get running this assessments, interpreting the results, and so on and so forth? But what we're seeing now is that a lot of the times is trying to push for this enablement factor. We want to be enabled to actually run these assessments ourselves, and to be able to feed back to the participants, to the management, to the board, to the stakeholders about what do the results mean. I want to be able to analyze the data. I want to be able to break it down and create a narrative out of that, right? So this then definitely impacts the kind of choices that you make as to how much training and support are we given when we purchase these assessments, right? Is it as simple as purchasing, running it, and then done? Or are you there with us the whole time? Are you there with us running the assessments? Are you there with us to analyze the results, and so on and so forth, right? So most of the time, these are the top 7, I would say, challenges that are faced by most organizations. Now, of course, these are not the only 7. There are multiple other ones as well, but these are the ones that we see coming out very commonly amongst most of our clients. And so not only do you have to think about the challenges that you face, but now you have all of these challenges, there is a decision journey that every client goes through. Every one of you who are in this position right now, it's a journey that you go through to make the decision. And I just going to illustrate with you, the kind of typical steps that most clients take to even come to a decision, right? So number one, like we said, conduct a need analysis to define assessment requirements. What do I need? What's happening right now that requires assessments? Right? Is it a recruitment? Is it a promotion? Is something like a remuneration study, does that require an assessment? Job evaluations, job design, grade design, do those require assessments, right? So there's a lot of thinking that goes into it to even decide whether you need an assessment or not. First step. And already most of you probably know this, when there is a decision made, there's a committee made, there's a special project made, right? And those who are in that committee or those who are in that special projects are then taken away from their day-to-day roles. You now end up double hatting to be the ones overseeing the assessments. First step already, a lot of things going on. Second step already is then once you've recognized the type of assessment that you want or what you want to use the assessment for, you're now going out there in the market and seeing all the different potential assessment vendors out there, right? Most of the time, if you're a large organization, this ends up being an RFP, right? We know the process of creating an RFP in itself is a very long, tedious process. Sometimes you already met a vendor and then you have to create an RFP to cater to that. Sometimes you create an RFP and you have to see multiple vendors, select those vendors, really analyze them, really research them, really evaluate them to choose the vendor that you want. And bearing in mind the 7 challenges that we spoke about, all those things come into place. Does this vendor provide support and training? What's the cost impact of these vendors? What kind of tools do they have, etc., right? And we're only on step 2 in making the decision for this. After you've gone through that, maybe you've selected the vendors or you boiled it down to the top 2, top 3. You then request, can I try out the assessment? Can we see what the reports look like? We want to know what is the candidate experience, what is the administrative experience. This in itself, you're already adding on a few more days, a few more weeks already. Very, very common, and rightfully so. Every client has the right to do so, to ask for sample assessments, to get a look and feel of what it is, and to see whether it's something that actually meets your requirements, meets what's needed. And so we're only on step 3 in this decision journey. Right? Then once you've landed on it, you then talk to the subject matter experts within that vendors, right? So if it's people who select Accendo, they will either talk to myself or my team. They really want to know much more about the assessment. What can it do? What levels can it measure? How long does it take? How far does it go? Can it be used for multiple purposes? All those different things. You're already having that consultation element in there already, right? And this is now starting to drag on a little bit, and this is why sometimes you're looking at a couple of months from deciding you need to do assessments to even then choosing, and we're not even done yet with this journey. So after you've spoken to the expert, once you really understood what the assessment tool does, perhaps you want to conduct a pilot. Now, this doesn't happen every single time. I'll give you that, but definitely a lot of my past experience with much larger organizations. Before you launch an assessment for 100 people, even 500 people, we've had assessments launched for more than 1,000, nearly 2,000-3,000 people. Before you do that, you obviously, yes, you have every right to want to test it out. Have a small group of candidates to go through the assessments, right? And just to share with you, that's the most common experience we have here in Accendo. Before we actually go, we go big bang. We actually have a small sample size. Let's do it with your top 10 hypos right now, or let's just do it with your management team, right? Keep the numbers small so you get the look and feel, you understand the administrative part. As you're going through the pilot and testing it, you then can see, where did it work, where it didn't work, what could be improved, where do you want to see things change, so on and so forth, right? And even a small pilot, that in itself can already be about a month or two, if not more, just to conduct the pilot already, right? After doing the pilot, then this is sometimes done concurrently, but again, then you're negotiating the pricing. Then you're seeing, okay, what's the difference of buying these assessments for 1 year versus 2 years versus 3 years? What happens if I want to do it at a random time? Can I do it one off, or is it in certain times? How many assessments do I need to buy, etc., etc., right? This in itself already, and I'm sure most of you have gone through this. After we've done step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, after we've done the pilot, so on and so forth, when you then want to go big bang, then you have the issues of like procurement coming in, right? Procurement team then needs to validate, they need to understand, they need to see what's going on, and every right, that's what they're supposed to do, and then trying to convince them that this is the tool that's needed. And so this is where we see a lot of collaboration between the stakeholders within the organization that wants the assessments, with the vendors, presenting to the procurement team, really justifying the pricing, justifying the assessment, justifying the outcomes, and so on and so forth, right? And then finally we get to the last part. Hopefully the vendors that you choose are able to provide training and support for the administrators or the HR professionals who will then have to take this assessment on and run with it, right? And most of the time, the kind of clients that we meet, why they sometimes end up exploring other assessment tools actually really does boil down to that, right? It really does boil down to, what, we weren't supported as much. Every time we ask for help or support, they send a consultant, they charge us a consultant's fee, right? Whenever we want to be able to do further analysis, they tell us that they can't break down the tool any further. You get what you get, right? This is the report. There's nothing to it. We can't customize it to your requirements, right? So most of the time, this is where we see a lot of clients actually start exploring other assessments. And when you start exploring other assessments, you've essentially gone back to step 1, right? And when you go back to step 1, you have to go through that entire journey again. And this journey, it can last anything between 3 months to even up to a year plus. I can say we definitely have had some clients that's been with us for a year plus, and we're still within that pilot stage. So it's definitely a long journey. And questions that will come up along the way with this is, as you're going along this journey, maybe some assessment tools have been updated. Maybe there are newer assessment tools that are coming into the market. Should you stick to the one that you've been working with this whole time, or do you need to now explore, right? So there's a lot of things that come into place that makes this very, very challenging, makes it very hard for clients, potential such as yourself, looking for assessments. And then, like I said, adding salt to all of this wound, imagine and some of you probably have experienced this, you have a team that does purely talent acquisition. You have a team that does purely talent development. You have a team that does purely talent management. 4 different teams using 4 different tools. How do you keep it consistent in the kind of things that you're measuring, in the kind of things that you want to measure for the organization, to ensure the quality of candidates coming in, quality of scores for potential successors, so on and so forth. And you have 3 different teams working on 3 different tools, 3 different approaches. How do you actually then have that cohesiveness across the organization? Or you have organizations that are in different countries, different offices have different approaches. So these are the kind of things that adds on to these challenges, makes the journey a lot more difficult. All right. So hopefully, I'm not hopefully, but some of you may have experienced this. Some of you may be going through this right now, and this is why you're potentially reaching out and interested in what we want to do. So now, how do we overcome this? What makes Accendo different? what makes Accendo stand out from the rest when it comes to facing these challenges. Now, putting my hands up, I'm not going to say that our approach eliminates every single one of those challenges, right? For sure. If not every single organization would already be with us. But what we try to do is that we try to mitigate as much as we can. We try to cut down some of the challenges. So we will face those challenges, but rather than having it over a period of weeks, over a period of months, we're talking about days. We're talking about flexibility. We're talking about being able to meet your requirements, right? Putting the client first and see how we can support. So let me just give me the next 15, 20 minutes or so, just to share with you about our approach, the kind of assessment tools that we have, what makes us different compared to what's happening out there in the marketplace. And essentially, when I was putting this presentation together, I was thinking of all the different clients that we have, all the different case studies that we have. And, I was going to go down that route of just sharing with you all the different challenges and how do we meet this. But what we came to a conclusion is that essentially it really does boil down to two main things when it comes to assessments and how Accendo approaches it. And it's number one, our assessment marketplace, and number two, our TalentPulse platform, our TalentPulse Intelligence Platform, right? Really, the essence of what we do breaks it down into these two different things, right? So let me share a little bit about what is our assessment marketplace. So just quickly recapping the challenges that was brought up earlier, right? Multiple assessments, multiple assessment vendors. You want to look into the cost effectiveness. You want to look into the validity of the tools. You want to look into the ability to do analysis and so on and so forth. And right now, just like we said, the assessment marketplace right now is very, very saturated. There are 1,001 different tools out there, 1,001 different vendors out there, each of them saying that they have the best tool for you, etc., etc. So how do we tackle this? We actually essentially created our own marketplace. So rather than just being a singular assessment vendor, we create our own marketplace, having multiple assessment tools in there. And so what is the benefit of having your own marketplace, us having our own marketplace? Number one, the challenges that was brought up earlier, and most of you voted for that. With us, you're only handling one vendor, that vendor being Accendo, but with that one vendor, there are multiple tools for multiple case studies, for multiple reasons, for across all different types of levels, right? So in our marketplace, we have a variety, and I'll go into it. We have a variety of psychometric tools that caters from your entry graduate level right up to your CEO levels. We have tools that can enhance the assessment experience. So cognitive assessments come into play, business simulations come into play, gamified assessments come into play here, right? And so having essentially with us, with TalentPulse, with Accendo, all these different assessment tools, giving you access to all those tools, but only handling one vendor cuts away a lot of the challenges that are already faced, right? And because we are very familiar with the tools, and just to share with you how we actually select the tools, we don't simply add in any old tool, any old assessment into our marketplace. They themselves go through our own rigorous assessments as well. It has to be valid, right? The validity and the science has to be there, right? They have to be backed up. The flexibility of the cost has to be there as well, right? And everything has to be online. Everything has to be digital, right? We recognize that is something that is a not a nice to have, but a requirement. It's a must have, if anything, right? So number one, very, very key. You're only handling one vendor. However, you have access to multiple tools within our marketplace. With that, because again, you're just handling with us, deploying the assessments can be very, very quick, right? you have my team, myself and my team, who are there, who can already immediately advise you as to what assessment tools you should be using, depending on what scenarios you're facing, whether it's recruitment or whether it's C-suite assessments. We will be able to identify for you what assessment tools are needed. And because there is a number of tools, there is that flexibility as to, what is actually your price point. How, as I mentioned just now, how much are you willing to invest per person for this? Now, at the same time, what can also happen is that you can run multiple assessments in one go, right? You don't have to do one after the other. So we definitely have clients who are running talent acquisition and hypo assessments and succession planning assessments all at the same time, right? And all again through us, through TalentPulse, right? You have that ability to do multiple assessments, multiple journeys for that. And essentially what this means when I share the challenge about 3-4 different teams working separately, if you have these 3-4 different teams all using the same tools, all using the same platform, they can still focus on their requirements. They can still focus on acquisition. They can still focus on development, so on and so forth. However, using the same platform, using the same tools allows that consistency of data, consistency of information across the teams. This is where you're doing things where you're able to be more flexible, you're able to be more dynamic. Different teams can talk to each other. I love presenting the scenario of, a candidate going through talent acquisition, going through an assessment. The moment they are onboarded into the organization, the talent development team already can pick up the data about that new candidate and have a development plan for them right from day one, right? So that already increases your employee value proposition to say that the moment you join us, we already know how to grow you. We already know how to push you to become the better versions of yourselves. Because everything is online, what it means is reports, data, analysis, all of that becomes potentially immediately available for you, right? Especially reports. We have our approach to reports, and I'll go into that, where no matter how many assessment tools you do or how many assessment tools the candidate goes through, everything gets consolidated into a singular, very easy, understandable report. And we have reports, again, for different situations. Reports for recruitment, reports for graduates, report for sales team, reports for development, reports for C-suites, right? All of the different types of reports. But the idea is that everything is A, online, B, easily understandable and consolidated, right? So like I mentioned, consolidated across multiple tools, right? So this reduces, and I think somebody brought up about the ability to analyze, the ability to analyze is a lot easier now because you're not doing manual consolidation. You don't, we try to essentially improve our platform in the sense where clients, you don't have to download into an Excel, you don't have to make pivot tables, you don't have to come up with formulas on your Excel sheets and so on and so forth to come up with the data. It can be done on the platform, right? And then this is where we have all our different dashboards. Again, I'll share that with you in a while to do that, but is using that data across different situations through multiple tools. Integration. So we talked about that earlier just now. Yes, we recognize the importance of integration. And again, working with a single vendor means that out of all the tools that we have in our marketplace, you're just doing that one integration. You do not need to integrate with multiple vendors. You do not need to integrate with multiple tools. Integrating with TalentPulse just at one time gives you access to all the data that TalentPulse has, and vice versa. All the data that needed to make decisions better on TalentPulse, we can pull that data in from your HRMSs as well. So data like performance, past years to performance data like years of experience, personal data, so on and so forth. All of that can be on the platform. So TalentPulse becomes our assessment marketplace, and TalentPulse becomes that single source of truth. The last two, undoubtedly, everything that we do, every time we update our platform, every time we enhance our solutions, our user experience comes in the forefront, right? we do not want TalentPulse or the assessment marketplace to become another challenge to add on to everything else, right? If anything, it should make your life easier. It should make your roles more effective. It should make your decisions more accurate and more effective when it comes to talent decisions. All right. So everything that we do, every time we have our internal product team catch ups, every time we come up with a solution, the user experience is always in the forefront. You have to make it sure that it is essentially easy to use to the point where you don't even need to think about using it. You're focusing purely on just the decisions you need to make, the analysis that you need to make, right? And lastly, yes, scalable and cost effective, right? Flexibility is there. Flexibility in our costing is there. Whatever caters to your needs, from small batches to entire organizations to thousands, we are very flexible in approaching that, right? So this is our assessment marketplace in a nutshell, essentially, right? Mainly being a single vendor and having access to all those tools. So talking about tools, let me just go into this very quickly. So this is just really the tip of the iceberg of the kind of tools that we have. I'm just sharing with you the ones that I most commonly use. So number one are psychometric assessments, right? Splits into two: behavioral and motivation assessments, cognitive assessments. We typically use these two together, right? The behavior and cognitive. We use these two together. Your behavioral and motivation assessments measures your if you have behavioral competencies in your organization, the leadership competencies in your organization. We want to make sure that like I said, whatever you're measuring is relevant to you, whatever is being measured is accurate. We want to make sure, and we always do this for all of our clients, that we are measuring the behaviors that you are expecting of your people in your organization. So this is why when we use the tools such as Adept 15 and Views, we need to be able to cater to, can we measure your expected behaviors? Can we measure your leadership competencies, your behavioral competencies, right? This is where our flexibility comes into play. Even though these tools are Aon tools that are considered off the shelf for other clients who are not using TalentPulse, when you're using Accendo, when you're going through Accendo, using TalentPulse, we can guarantee to you that we will be using it to measure what you want to measure specifically, rather than on a high level basis, right? So definitely being able to measure your competencies, measure your behaviors is a key factor for us. Now, sometimes, and most of the time, we actually want to enhance that. We want to add layers of rigor to our assessment. So not only measuring behaviors is effective enough, we actually want to add on to this. And this is where our cognitive assessments come into play, right? Being able to see how quickly people can think, their problem-solving skills, their willingness to unlearn and relearn new things, how quickly they can learn new things. This is where our cognitive assessments come into play. And again, this is where the beauty of the assessment marketplace comes in, because as you can see here, you have Adapt 15, Views, numerical, verbal, logical reasoning. 5 different tools. You're using 5 different tools to measure a candidate. And because if you're doing this through TalentPulse, it's just a singular experience for the candidate. They just need to sign in once, and then they see all these 5 tools for them to do. They go through those 5 tools. The moment they complete it, their scores are immediately available to download in that consolidated report, as I mentioned, right? So in a normal scenario, in a different scenario, if you were to use 5 different tools, you'll have 5 different reports. The candidate maybe had to log in 5 different times, right? And that already is a deterring factor to the candidate doing proper assessments, a deterring factor for you administrating these assessments, right? Whereas this experience, you're just doing it one time. You don't have to manage 5 different tools. You just have to manage just that one journey to do these tools, right? And the ability to put different tools together adds that rigor in your assessment, giving you better insights of the candidate, allowing you to make better decisions. Okay, so just a little bit about the Adapt 15 I won't go too much into detail about this, but yes, it is. Like I said, all of our tools are online, and most of our tools are mobile friendly. Again, we are very aware of the user experience. We're very aware of what's needed to ensure that they want to do the assessments, but they do it in a comfortable environment. Do it where they can be honest and true to themselves. And with the likes of tools like Adapt 15, the cognitive tools I shared earlier, every single one of these tools has the science behind them. We have the white papers to back up the validity of these tools, right? So our clients who are with us, they don't need to worry about whether the tools are valid, whether the tools are measuring what is supposed to be measured. All of our tools that we have on our marketplace have those years of research behind them, has the science behind them, to back up what it is measuring, right? So that's some of the benefits, and Adapt 15 being one of them. Very, very effective tool that we use to measure behaviors. Now, I talked about the variety of tools, and Adapt 15 is, yes, one of the psychometric tools, but we've definitely had situations where it's like, hey, I want to measure my top team. I want to measure potential CEOs. I want to measure potential C-suites. This feels a little bit too rudimentary, right? It doesn't give that feeling that this is a serious tool enough to measure. And so this is where our flexibility comes in. And you know what? Even though we are probably still going to be measuring your behaviors and motives, however, if the Adapt 15 and the Views tool doesn't feel right, yes, we have other tools like Hogan, right? Now, Hogan immediately, just through this branding, through its own name, already has that level, the essence of okay, we're stepping up a little bit. These are assessments that are catered more towards senior management executives. The experience is the same. Everything is still online. Everything's still a single sign-on. However, you're using a more quote unquote serious tool in order to do that. And already this changes the notion of the kind of tools that we have on the marketplace, because, like I said, the flexibility to measure, to assess across all different levels, from your senior C-suites right down to your graduate entry level, right? Then we have business simulations, catering to different situations, different challenges that you may face. Business simulations we use to validate the assessment. So again, another layer of rigor comes into place. Multiple different types of simulations here, depending on what you're measuring, from iLead, which is your leadership pool, SalesQuest, to your sales team, so on and so forth. Different simulations to help that. And again, this enhances not only the assessment experience, but also your insights into the candidates. So if you think about it, essentially every time you're adding more assessment tools, you're getting more information, you're getting more data, you're getting more insights about the individual. But of course, that comes at a cost. So that's where the flexibility comes in. Nothing is forcing you to use simulations, right? You don't have to use, we won't come in and say, hey, you need to use simulations for every single one of the assessments. We don't do that. What we will say is, you know what? Maybe if you're looking at a C-suite level, yes, we would recommend a simulation because you want to have that extra layer of rigor. And it is completely up to you and your call to say, okay, yeah, this is the kind of insights that we want. We want, this is a big decision. We don't want to play around. We are willing to invest that extra amount just to get that extra level of insights. And that's where the flexibility comes in with our assessment marketplace. Right? And yes, we have tools like 360. I won't go too much into this. All of you are familiar with 360. Again, we have our own 360. Again, it's online. Again, it's through TalentPulse. All that experience for the candidates is there. And then when it comes to things like a little bit more physical, so whether you're doing a recruitment or whether you're doing a BI internally, face-to-face experience with the candidate. Is it possible to have the scores from the interviewer, from the assessor, as part of the other assessments? Yes, 100%, right? We do encourage the ability to have the assessor's point of view, the assessor scoring, as part of the overall assessment experience. And when you're part of the overall assessment experience, the outcome, the results, the reports, so on and so forth, will all be there as well. So it's definitely something that we encourage. And again, that flexibility, you don't have to do it every single time, right? And at the same time, we have reports, especially on the recruitment side, we have reports that are able to generate CBI questions, so that for your assessors, for your interviewers, depending on how the candidate has scored in their assessments, in their psychometric assessments and cognitives, they then have the ability to probe even further, because you have questions which are catered to however the person has scored. Right? Then second one, and again, I won't go too much into this because our focus for today is mainly about assessments. But like I said, the two things put together, our assessment marketplace and our TalentPulse platform, the two working together really gives you that ability, that insight. I won't go too much into this. This shows you, and again, we will share this with you guys later on. But when we talk about assessments, and when I talk about assessments to clients, you're doing assessments for something, right? Whether it's for recruitment, whether it's for hypo, so on and so forth. But a lot of times is once you've done it for that one particular thing, what happens next? What do you do with that data? And this is very valuable information and data about the person. So we always try to work with the clients to think about what's next. How can you extend that lifespan of the results that you're using? Should it only be a one-off? How can you use that results to now think about other things like role fit, for example, learning and development, closing those gaps, so on and so forth. How do you actually start building into it? And the one thing we haven't touched upon in this webinar is jobs, right? We haven't really touched upon jobs, but that's another critical factor when it comes to making decisions about people. What role are we moving them into? What role are we considering them? Is the role that they are in right now the right role for them? How can we improve them? How can we develop them so they are better fit for the roles? All those comes into play, and essentially this is the entire architecture within TalentPulse, is to make better end-to-end talent management decisions, so you can have the best potential versions of your people, really upskilling them and making them best versions of themselves. Right? Very quickly, from your point of view, from the administrative point of view, like we mentioned, you don't have to do assessments one at a time. You can run multiple assessments at the same time. And to be able to do that, creating and managing assessments should be a very, very easy experience. And it is simple. The screenshots I have here for you shows you how easy it is to simply create an assessment, and shows you how to manage assessment, seeing all the candidates, seeing where they are, whether they're in progress, whether they completed. Once they completed it, just from here, this same dashboard, this same screenshot, you can download the reports, right? Everything's there already. Essentially, we want to minimize the number of touch points that you need to have with a consultant on our side, right? We really aspire to enable our clients to run this and manage this as best as they can by themselves. Of course, when challenges come, when new things come in, when you need solutionizing, that's where our team will always be there to support. But the idea is TalentPulse should be there to enable you to run these things as and when you need. So that flexibility of timing. You don't have to wait for consultants 2-3 weeks to come up with results. You can just run it yourselves. Right? And when it comes to insights, when it comes to analysis, we have multiple dashboards on the system that can help you. So things like, for example, a journey report. You want to see how many people you have in each step of the journey of your assessment. So in this example here, right? How many people are new? How many is invited? How many have completed? How many have I reports have I generated? I want to be able to see that. I can see from this group of 102 people what's the average score in their leadership, cultural fit, so on and so forth. All very familiar with 9box. How do we make it more dynamic? How can we break down the scores that we have from the assessments to see what we're looking for? And this is where that potential integration thing can come in very, very effectively. Because say, for example, I want to be able to measure my leadership against my past performances, right? So that's where you can now start bringing in other external data points to make your analysis, to really break it down, to really identify potential candidates. So for example, a hypo, usually we recommend leadership versus agility, and you can see who are the top right box, top middle box, so on and so forth. Right, but this really allows you to break down the data, slice and dice, and see what's needed. Right, and then like I said, something like recruitment, right? You want to be able to get as much information about the potential candidate before you bring them on board. And this is things like when we bring them on board, are they suited for the role they're in? What's their fit to hire? If we bring them in, what's the potential development they need to go through? All the insights that you need about a candidate before you bring them on board. You have dashboards there. Sorry. You have dashboards there to support you. Right, and the last few slides, just to share with you again, our report, consolidated report, everything's available. The moment the candidate finishes his or her assessment, technically the report is immediately available to download. And easy to read. We're very conscious about who the readers are of the report. It's not always just the candidate, or it's not always just HR. You definitely have the managers reading the report as well, and you want it to be accessible. You want it to be able for them to easily understand what they can do with the report. Right, and this is just an example of that. And as I mentioned, you have 3, 4, 5 different reports. 3, 4, 5 different assessments, all consolidated into a singular report. So just to wrap up some of the overview of the TalentPulse solutions, I've talked about this already. Multiple uses of our assessments, from your recruitment, your graduate hiring, succession planning, digital leadership mindset, so on and so forth. Beyond just these 6 here, we are able to cater to a whole plethora of different types of scenarios that you're facing, and how can we cater to that. So just to wrap up, to share with you, this is the kind of allocation of assessments that we said. So I mentioned already, for Hogan, for example, you may want to reserve it for your C-suite senior managers. You have your Aon, Adapt 15, and Views for the lower levels, right? So, this is just a guide, but it doesn't mean that you have to do that. And you can see that, there's no requirement, but you can definitely add a simulation to it. You can definitely add a 360 to your assessment. So that flexibility of all the different types of tools that you have for whatever scenarios you're facing definitely comes into play. Okay, so then just to wrap up, just to share with you, these are the kind of tools that we have. I already spoken most about them, the Hogan, the Aons, all the different cognitive tools. And like I said, what makes us different from other organizations? Multiple assessment tools all in one place. You have the validity behind it, the science behind it, be able to do the proper benchmarking. Customization, flexibility is there because we have these tools on our platform. You're not going to be spending money customizing every single tool. You're probably just customizing the experience, customizing the report. We can work with you on that one, right? Then you can see the rest. One thing that we really want to push for, and I mentioned it earlier, we want to cater to what your requirements are. We want to make sure we are measuring your leadership behaviors, your competencies, the scenarios that you are in. So we are very, very open to that, very flexible to all of that. And that includes things like integration. Yes, talk to us. We will try and find a way, if it's possible, to integrate with your other systems. We do not want to be another challenge. We do not want to be another burden to that. So on that note, I think we have about 10 minutes or so now just to for any Q&As. But thank you everybody for your time. Hopefully this is piques your interest in the kind of things that we do. It is the tip of the iceberg. We're more than happy to set up further meetings, further conversations, to really understand what your challenges are and how Accendo and TalentPulse can help you in overcoming those challenges. So thank you again, everybody, for your time. We really do appreciate this. And I think Hardik or Kenneth, we have about 5 minutes or so for any questions that people may have. And I believe this deck, the slides, has already been shared in the chat, or I think in the handouts section here. So please do download that if you have any further questions or wanted to see more of that. Thank you, everybody. Okay, Hardik or Kenneth, is there anything else or any questions from anybody before we wrap up? Oh, okay, I see questions. Up to which level is ADAPT 15 suitable? All levels, from your I would say your executive level, so not quite graduates, though you can use it for graduates for sure, right up to your C-suites. It's a very, very good tool for all levels. The only reason why sometimes we would recommend Hogan for the more senior levels, like I mentioned, some of the feedback we get from our clients is that it doesn't feel as serious. The credibility won't be there if we're using it for the more senior levels. And so that's why sometimes we would then recommend Hogan. But it really is up to your budget, how much you're willing to invest, how much time you're willing to put into it. It really boils down to that. But ADAPT 15 is a very good tool to use it across, and it's something that we are really, really pushing for. Aptitude tests is always deemed to be best suited for fresh grads. Yes, to an extent. And you can definitely do aptitude tests for fresh grads. However, where we come in is and why what makes us different is that the ability to add in more tools just gives you more rigor to that. And when we say we add in more tools, it doesn't necessarily mean it's more expensive. Share with you to do ADAPT 15 views and cognitive assessments, that can come in as a singular price rather than a tool by tool price, right? And just being able to do multiple assessments gives you that ability to really understand the candidates, further insights. And at the same time, because everything is online, what this actually means is that it gives the candidate the flexibility as to when and how they want to complete the assessments. They don't have to do it all in one go. They can start one assessment on a Monday, do the cognitive on a Wednesday, and then do the rest over the weekend, right? What we normally typically find is that these candidates typically finish or do the assessments later in the evening or on the weekends, because they have that flexibility to do it as and when they want. And then they can also have the time to make sure they are doing it properly and effectively. So yes, aptitude test is always deemed best, but we can also, what we also encourage is that you can add in other things, especially cognitives. They help you measure the agility. And with graduate levels, you want to ensure that your graduates are agile, that they are able to learn new things very quickly. When they join your organization, you want them to be able to pick up processes very quickly, pick up what they're supposed to do very quickly, and also helps you measure the willingness to wanting to learn and wanting to develop. So that's something that's very key when it comes to looking in your graduates. What values is measured under MVPI? Can that be linked to respect? Yes. So just like COMSIs and leadership behaviors, we definitely also measure organizational values, and that's one, and that adds into our cultural fit measurement. And the way it works with MVPI, so MVPI being a Hogan, is that before we actually launch the assessment, whatever values that we have mapped the MVPI to, we always go back to Hogan. So Hogan's own expertise, their own consulting team, we actually go back to Hogan and ask them to validate the mapping that we have done. So we will say, Hogan, these are the values of the organization. These are the dimensions or aspects of MVPI that we have mapped, and therefore is measuring these values. Hogan, please validate, come back to us. We will talk about if there's anything missing or anything can be enhanced. So MVPI is definitely used to measure your values 100% for that. Yeah. I hope that answers your question. And not only for MVPI, but then we also use the same Aon tools to also measure values, and it's the same thing. We want to make sure that the dimensions that we are mapping of the tool is the accurate one, or the most closest one to measuring your organizational values. Okay. Any more questions from anybody else? If not, again, thank you everybody so much for your time. Please do reach out to the organizers of this this webinar, so Hardik and Kenneth, if you do want to schedule a meeting with my team. We're more than happy to do, even visit your office. We're a little bit tired working from home nowadays. So happy to have a one-on-one. See what are the potential challenges that you have, or if you want to know more, please do reach out to us, and we're happy to have that conversation with each and every single one of you.